hope this is on. Can you guys all hear me? Awesome. Yeah, cool, awesome. I'll go on my tiptoes too. Okay. Cool. Thank you all for braving the snow and making it here to remember our grandpa, father, brother, uncle with us today. It means a lot that you all showed up to be here with us today, especially through the weather. So, my Uncle Joe will be reading a remembrance of my grandpa.
So we've got a quote that our brother Jeff shared with us at the hospital when we took turns staying with Dad during the 11 days he was hospitalized. And it goes, "There are times in life when the highest honor, the greatest love is paid to another by simply bearing witness to his or her experience during life and even at death. Bearing witness is largely nonverbal. It is the choice to give the gift of a pure expression of presence, love, and respect. Being a compassionate observer to the unfolding of another person's life or a particular moment or event."
So I am the first of 6 tributes, and my name is Jim Christian, and I'm, of course, the second born of Gary's kids, Jeff, Joe, Jim, Jill. The one characteristic that first comes to mind when I think about my dad is fiercely independent, and he lived his entire life that way. Like you, perhaps, I didn't always agree with all his outspoken, unfiltered positions on certain issues. However, I will always remember, respect, and appreciate the many good and noble characteristics and values he exemplified in how he lived his life. First, meaningful work. For example, he hired me at age 13 for $3 an hour to work for him in his contractor and construction business. I think my brother Jeff started working near that same age too. Is that about right, Jeff? Yep. My 8+ year learning experience with him taught me humility, satisfaction of seeing the results, and pride of doing good work, even though it was hard and long. He was a good teacher and always showed by example, including doing things right the first time. Dad also allowed me to fail, fix, and learn from my mistakes. He introduced me or taught me to carpentry skills, hard work, finishing the job, numerous horseback trail riding weekends, harnessing horses, repairing buggies and sleighs. I also learned how to operate the 1939 Alice Chalmers WD, which he traded in for a newer 1949 model, and the old road grader, and of course the front snowplow, and the list goes on. So first was meaningful work. Second was being a dedicated dad. Even though our parents, Gary and Nancy, divorced in '69, when we were young, nearly every Sunday, he picked us 4 kids up in his single-seat pickup truck to spend the day with him. Those days were filled with adventures and all kinds of fun and mischief. Some resulted in injuries. I can only imagine my mom Nancy's worry or dread of what might happen to us after we left on those Sundays. He did show up most every Sunday. Dad wasn't one to show emotion, much less words of love for us. But his consistent actions over many years of Sundays with Dad showed, rather than told, us he loved us. I never felt disadvantaged whatsoever from being from a broken home because we had 2 parents who loved and cared for us. They just showed it differently. Third is determined. He loved the 10-acre hobby farm with the horses, large garden, lots of grass to mow, and all the typical farmstead outbuildings to store his numerous buggies, sleighs, building materials, antiques, and other stuff. We called it Grandpa's Hardware Store. We'd always go out there first before we go to the store. I believe his determination to do the chores to keep the garden, buildings, and grass looking well kept was the exercise he needed to extend his life to age 84. The last 3 years were tough. After a quadruple bypass and aortic valve replacement in 2018, followed by a one-vehicle rollover accident in December, pretty close to this time last year, with 2 full revolutions landing upright on the wheels while unbuckled, took a lot out of his strong body. He actually walked away from that. He had a broken vertebrae, broke his neck, but amazing. Those chores served as a substitute for the cardiac rehab he refused to do, and even the personal training that I got him to go to until he swore at the people and said he wouldn't come back. Remember, he was fiercely independent. Dad was his own man, and when he made up his mind, nothing stopped him from following through or refusing to do so. So the last one is the fourth one, which is humble and simple. As Dad became older, it was obvious he didn't pay much attention to what others think about what he did, said, or acted. More so in his late 70s and early 80s, whether it was Dad's unknown age of his faded orange hunting cap or that red ski jacket that you see out there, which he wore to his sister Patty's funeral in October this year, or favorite Randy Travis baseball cap that he wore for so long, he was reluctant to give them up ever. Several years ago, our sister Jill washed that hat in one of those little plastic things you put in the machine because it had become so filthy from just all the years of dust, dirt, and sweat. Unfortunately, when it came out of the wash, essentially, it kind of fell apart, and he was not happy. I don't remember what he told you, Jill, but yeah, it was not good. So more recently, if you're wondering why this twine, you saw a piece out there and you see a piece hanging here, he used a piece of baler twine, tied to a belt loop on the back of his jeans, came over across the shoulder and tied to the opposite side on the front belt loop. I have to tell you, that was a sight. Hunched over, walking through, holy jeans. Anyway, he'd drive to Elko, New Market, or New Prague for cigarettes or groceries without a care, wearing that piece of twine over his shoulders, holding up his holy jeans. Hopefully he didn't wear that baler twine to Sunday breakfast with Dottie Hanson and Gary Lyons. Dad's life was humble and simple. In fact, he never owned a computer, cell phone, or a credit card, although he was still able to get scammed. In fact, he got scammed for $3,800 over the telephone just like a month and a half ago. So be careful. I was blessed to have Gary as my dad, and though he has run out of road in this life on earth, he influenced, touched, or helped many of us here today, or those that may be watching on the recorded video of this service. Thank you all for being here, for honoring him. I love and will miss you, Dad.
God blessed me with a dad who was not perfect, yet was perfect for me. Although he couldn't be there every day, he was always there when I truly needed him. He was a simple man that lived a very rich life. The words that describe my dad are the things that he took pleasure in and what made his life so rich. He had an immense sweet tooth. Reese's peanut butter cups, Neapolitan ice cream, and tapioca pudding could be always found in his house. Gardening. He always planted more than he could possibly eat just so he could share his bounty with his friends and family. Wheel of Fortune. I quickly learned it was a sin to vacuum during Wheel of Fortune. Fishing, hunting. Yesterday, I had counted 7 hunting magazines that he was receiving. I have to revise that number to 8 because a new one came today. Horses. He loved his horses and taking them on trail rides. He was an incredible country dancer. Women of all ages wanted to dance with him, and I've been told that by people that were shocked when they found out he was my dad. Happy hours were always complete when he had a friend in his Brandy 7. Hardworking, strong. No one can forget that iron grip, especially us kids, when we were being naughty. No words were needed, just that firm grip said it all. Tools, 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 and more tools. Indestructible. From smashing his fingers with his hammer, shooting a nail through his hand and pulling it out himself, doing a rafter dance to avoid serious injury, surviving a horse stomping accident, and that vehicle rollover that Jim talked about. And of course, he was fiercely independent. He was a mentor, a friend, son, brother, uncle, grandpa, dad, and at times a man of few words. In fact, I can't remember him ever telling me, "I love you." However, he did say it through his actions. For me, those included putting a new roof on my house after the storms of 1998, while my neighbors watched in jealousy because they couldn't find a contractor, yet 4 days after the storm, I'm getting a new roof already. My multiple plumbing emergencies, doing the framing of the second home, doing the entire basement for us as a housewarming gift, coming at 6 o'clock in the morning to get Josh and Jamie up and out of bed and off to school when I was traveling for work. He helped build my third home in Credit River Township. He helped me move more than once. But doesn't everybody move with a stock trailer? All I had to do was ask and he would be there. I will forever be grateful that I was able to help him out over the last several years. Spending time with him doing mundane household and outdoor chores brought us closer together. We were able to spend precious time together and build wonderful memories that I will cherish forever. I will always remember how he hated to do dishes. This fall, he even saved up 3 weeks' worth of dishes while I was recovering from surgery. He actually decided to pick up all the black walnuts in his yard versus doing dishes. The payment that I got for all this work was being able to watch the excitement on his face when he would open the refrigerator and it would be full of all of his favorite foods. 2 weeks ago, I ran across a letter I had wrote to him in September of '82. I don't remember writing it, but it was me telling him that I loved him, even though I didn't say it often enough. I even told him he was a supercalifragilisticexpialidocious dad. It brought tears to my eyes knowing that he saved that letter for 39 years. During our last 4 years, I tried to say I loved him each time I left the house. I would say, "I love you, Dad." He would reply, "Yup." He would go out on the deck as I got into my car, and we would wave to each other as I drove down the driveway. The last day he was able to respond to me, I said, "I love you, Dad." He replied, "Good." Goodbye, Dad. Love you.
Hi, I'm Lisa, Wyvon's daughter, and gosh, so many great things about Gary that just resonate with all of us, right? I think I moved in that same stock trailer. My stuff was a little green when it arrived, but so my mom moved out to the farm in 1990. And that farm was such a magical place. We have so many amazing memories, but my very first, one of my favorites, and I know we still laugh about it, the boys and I, is coming up the driveway and seeing Gary in the garden in his blue Speedo and his boots and nothing else. We laughed so hard, and that happened more than once, trust me. But more than anything, I always appreciated Gary's calm, quiet presence. He just was such a constant in our lives and was really during a pretty hectic time of my life. He was kind and patient with my boys. He really treated them so well. He could keep them busy doing anything, picking up sticks, black walnuts, feeding the horses. If I'd asked them to do those things, they would have said I was nuts. It would have been work, right? But they loved Gary. They would do anything he asked. He would set up targets. I think Mom got him started on this, but pull out all his guns and let them shoot. They just thought they were in heaven. You know, I was a little shocked, but they loved it. We had an exchange student one summer from Germany. His name was Philip. We took him out to the farm, and Gary got him set up with a holster. I have these hilarious pictures, holster and his pistol, and that boy had the time of his life shooting and talked about it during his whole trip. That and the Mall of America, of course, was a big deal. Gary, too, helped me with many projects around my home. He did lots of remodeling at a townhome that I owned. He was just always there for us, which was awesome. When my first cat of many, many years, 20 years, died, I called him and asked him if I could bury him at the farm. And he said, sure, you know. So I have a first of many, many pictures of pet burials out at the farm. And he made everyone was a party, right? The mom and Gary would have a cocktail, and we'd make roast marshmallows, and we just had a ball. One winter, we lost a pet in the dead of winter. Gary started a fire and let it burn for 2 days so the ground was soft enough that he could dig the hole for us. He was so good to us. And he loved a fire. The boys and I were just talking, looking at the pictures, right? Dominic's graduation, he built the biggest bonfire I've ever seen in my life. And Dominic was just telling me that, yeah, Gary had found several containers of different chemicals that he mixed together to make the trail, right? So he put them all in the same carton and sniffed them and said, yeah, this will work. And then he made the trail, and I think Tom was there, our firefighter, right? And hoses, Jill pulled out the hoses, and they lit that fire. Gary's cap flew off. All the kids hit the deck, and it burned for hours. It was awesome. It was awesome. So anyway, Gary was such an important part of our lives. He was amazing. The boys considered him his grandpa, or their grandpa, and he really felt like a stepdad to me. Time passes, relationships change, and things don't always turn out the way we want, but I haven't been back to the farm in a while, but I talked to Gary often, and he was so spunky and hilarious every time I talked to him. His favorite story was telling me how he felt the urge to moo after his heart surgery. And how we had to get those tires on that fateful night of his rollover. So he was a wonderful man, and I'll miss him always. So Jill and Jimmy and Joe and Jeff, thank you so much for sharing Gary with us. We really love him. He will always be grateful for our time with your family, and always be in our hearts.
My name is Bill Christian. I'm Gary's younger brother. I'd like to share a couple of our adventures growing up with you. We were only 16 months apart in age, and we shared many childhood adventures. Right from the beginning, Gary was always there. I had my own language, and he was the only one who could understand me. And this went on way too long, and my folks decided they were going to separate us. That did it. Then I learned English or whatever, because we didn't want to be apart. But that tractor Jimmy was talking about, the 39 Alice, was my dad's tractor for us. And it had a drive-in cultivator. You drove in and latched it a couple of places, pulled it up, there was up and down on the shovels, that was it. And my dad talked about it for 50 years. He came home one time and me and Gary had taken it apart, the whole thing. And the bolts are 3/4 rusty, painted. And we had a big pipe wrench, I remember that, but we were really small. And his hired man was Ole Frencher at the time, and He bitched about that. It took him almost half a day to put it together, the two of them, trying to remember what went where. One of the kids' favorite story that I told about Gary growing up was there was a ladder in the barn that went up to a platform about 5 by 4 maybe. And we were told never, ever, ever go up there. And one day, we went up there. There was a case of dynamite cord, fuse. And so we threw down the dynamite cord, and we were playing cowboys and Indians with the neighbor kid and Danny French. Well, my dad came in from the field at noon, and I was tied to a tree with dynamite cord. He says, "What's going on?" And I said, "We were playing cowboys and Indians, and I was the youngest. And they said they were going to burn me at the stake." Well, he saw there was no burning, and there was no more. He got rid of the dynamite. But another trick we were going to do didn't go real well. We had a chicken yard right next to the barn, and they had grew up with sunflowers, and they had all died, and we're all laying down like thatch all over. We parted them, and we dug a big hole. And the plan was to get the neighbor kid to chase us the next day, and we'd jump over that part, and he'd fall in the hole. After dark, my dad brought the garbage out, and you know where he went. He fell in the hole. He could hardly jump out. We really had it deep. And that was bad. He could have broke his neck, but we didn't. Needless to say, the neighbor kid was safe. We were filling that hole. Yeah. I think we had a lot of adventures, that's for sure. We played down in the river bottoms a lot. And the Army had quite a few acres there where they built bridges and lots of stuff for young guys to play on, you know. Nothing was safe down there when we got our 22s. And then a couple other things. I think I was in 3rd grade, we were wrestling, and he was so strong. He threw me over his shoulder and broke my right arm. The next year, my legs were getting long now, longer than his, and I used to like to race him now. So I said, "I'll race you to the car." And he tripped me, and I folded this finger back, broke that finger. But he was always there for me if I needed help with anything, and I loved him like only brothers can. Yes.
Well, I'm the youngest, Skip, and there's 9 years difference between myself and Patty, and 13 and 14 between the other two brothers. But I guess the first interaction that I don't remember it. I was a toddler. It's maybe a year old, if even that, in diapers running around in the backyard. They're supposed to be watching me. They're wrestling. Luckily, Dad had a big garden with a pool in the backyard, a small pool, just a couple feet deep. And he kept domesticated ducks and geese in there. And while they were wrestling, the geese and the ducks took off across the yard, and they noticed it, thank you. And they're going, "I wonder what scared the ducks." So they figure they better quit wrestling and go check it out. So they go over to the pool. I'm face down in the water and my butt's sticking out with the diaper. And they grab me. Bill said I coughed once or twice, never said a word. They set me down, and I just took off chasing the birds again. So they figured, boy, they dodged a bullet there. Well, Mom calls later, dinner's ready. She picks me up to put me in the high chair, and my diaper is damp. So they got busted. Another time, I think I was about 10, maybe 11, I went trick-or-treating with a neighbor kid. And at that time, you could go out late. It was probably 11:30 at night. And, you know, we had a pretty good haul by then. So we decided to go back to my house. And we're walking up the sidewalk to the front door, maybe about 10 feet away. All of a sudden, this black thing drops down in front of us. It's dressed all in black. He's got a sword in his hand, yelling. My neighbor friend, Steve, just turned around and ran off down the sidewalk, right across 66th Street. And I remember a couple cars honking at him. You know, he's not looking. I took off running around the side of the house, and I get tackled in the backyard, and I was Batman. So Mom had sewn me a Batman outfit, and I was wearing that. And rolls me over on his back, and I hear this voice. The guy had a black ski mask on to go with all his black clothes. And I recognized Gary's voice, so I knew it wasn't a crazy, it was my brother. And he had bought a short samurai sword when he was in Japan in the Marines, and he had that, and the sheath was in the other hand. And of course he unmasked me and took half the candy. And we went in the house, and Mom said, well, how did it go? And I said, well, it went pretty well until this guy jumps off the roof and, you know, scared the crap out of us. You know, Steve almost got hit by a car. And she looks at me, she goes, Gary. No wonder why hardly any kids came into the house this year, because she still had a bunch of candy left over. So, yeah, I mean, that could go on. He grabbed me by the ankle once because I probably mouthed off to him out at Lake Minnetonka, ran up a tree with me, one-handed, like this. Walked out on a branch, and I'm maybe 15 or 20 feet off the ground, and I don't remember what he said. I remember I wasn't afraid, I was shocked, and then I remembered who was holding me upside down like that. I was probably 12 or 13 and weighed 70 pounds probably. But, I mean, he was just so strong. I knew he wouldn't have done anything that crazy if he knew he couldn't handle it. Never got hurt, which, you know, is a good thing. I remember Mom coming out of the boathouse, because this was at Lake Minnetonka, and we had woods next door to the property, yelling at him, telling him, you get down here and bring your younger brother with you. But that was just his spirit. I mean, yeah, he followed his own rhythm in his life. And I'm lucky to have somebody like that.
Thanks for saving me all that extra minutes here. I had a lot of things to say. But before I start, I have to we have a tradition at Assumption Church. We had a lot of funerals there for Christians and other farmers who farmed in Richfield. And most of them were buried at Assumption. And the services were always at Assumption. So my brother Tom and I would sit in the back of the church. We'd do what I just did there. We counted all the bald heads. How many Christians are here for this service? There's Clarence. There's Curly. There's Butch. There's Jim. There's Claude. There's Ernie. There's Uncle Reuben. There's Uncle Lawrence. And that was a tradition. It still occurs. And I hope you tell all of your kids what they have to look forward to, or what they have to look forward without. Jim had called me after Gary died and asked if my brother Tom would be willing to write something about Gary. Because Gary and Tom were both born in 1937, and Bill and I were both born in 1939. Even though we didn't live very close to each other, we were in Richfield, in East Richfield, we did have a lot of things to do together. So Tom wrote this, and I'm going to read it for him. We stand with you as we celebrate the life of Gary Kermit Christian. Gary was born in September, and I was born in October 1937. So in one way, we grew up together. The family has asked me to share some stories on Gary. We picked potatoes together every fall for Uncle Clarence. And Uncle Clarence would have us wrestle when we finished loading the sacks on the truck. We faked it like the pros. We think he wanted us to be sure that we were tired out and would stay out of trouble. One time I remember we were having a family party at our Uncle Ted and Velva's farm in Rosemount. It was getting late and we were playing outside. Uncle Clarence pulled me aside and said, "Do you dare to go up to the cemetery way up on the hill, light a match, read the name on a tombstone, and come down again and show us?" I said, "No problem. Can I have Gary go with me?" He said, "No, I had to do it all by myself to show how brave I was." So off I went with a box of matches. I struck the tombstone, read the name, and started down the hill. It was so dark now, I started to run. Sure enough, Gary and all of our cousins were hiding along the way, jumped out and scared the pants off me. In 8th grade, Gary and I played football together in a suburban and city league. Gary blocked for me, and I would run by him for many a touchdown. They called us the dynamic duo. In our freshman year in high school, as you heard, Gary and I went to the seminary at Nazareth Hall in St. Paul. Yes, Gary was studying to become a priest. Actually, Clarence thought it would be a good education for Gary. They put us in the C League for touch football. Again, Gary blocked, and I ran for the touchdowns. After 2 games, they moved us up to A League. Latin got the best of Gary, so he moved on the next year to Roosevelt High School. I have to add a correction to my brother's statement there. Gary was actually asked not to return to the seminary his second year because he had been caught going off campus to smoke in 9th grade. People smoke in 9th grade. Gary was always in great shape. He could walk up a ladder to the roof not using his hands. He was so tough that when he spit, it bounced. When Bernice and I bought 3 lots up in Avon, Minnesota on Lower Spunk Lake, we had Gary help us connect an old temporary school classroom to an existing machine shed to form a cabin. We put in 2 bedrooms and a bath with a screen porch, and believe it or not, it looked fine. Gary taught me how to bend nails and gave us a family discount. Each night at the end of a long day, we would sit and admire our work and have a drink, which he retrieved from his pickup truck. I would like to close with a short prayer, so I'll read his prayer. Thank you, Lord, for giving us Gary for 84 years. We celebrate his talent, his love for family and friends, and all he was able to do in his lifetime here on earth. We will remember him and his personality and think of him in his unique ways. May he now be at peace and rewarded with eternal life. Amen. Now, I also told Jim that I had a few stories to add to that. I think I got about 12 pages here, but I'll just use one of them. We spent a lot of time together because of closeness in our ages. Gary and Tom, 1937, Bill and Ed, 1939. In addition, our parents were partners in the farming business. Clarence was growing potatoes and my father was raising pigs. They owned a farm together on East 66th Street on the south end to 62nd Street, which is now the crosstown, on the north end. From 13th Avenue on the east side to Mud Lake on the west side. I still call it Mud Lake. It's got some fancy names now, Veterans Park or Richfield Community Center or Recreational Center, but there was a muddy lake when we were there. Clarence planted potatoes from 66th Street to 64th Street. We had the farmhouse on 64th, on the equivalent of 12th Avenue, and my dad raised pigs from 64th Street back to 62nd Street. Back then, we raised pigs on garbage, not feed. My dad would go to Holy Angels, the Navy base, Catholic Boys Home, the Old Soldiers Home, and World Chamberlain Airport. He would collect the garbage in 50-gallon drums and then dump them in the troughs in our backyards to feed the pigs. One time, Bill and Gary were over, and we went back to where my dad was dumping the garbage. All of a sudden, a large watermelon fell out of the trough and broke open. We couldn't pass that up. So the 4 of us started eating the watermelon with our hands. We also collected a couple of sandwiches, which are still wrapped in saran wrap from the airport, and ate them, drinking them down with coffee creamers. We did this often, but Gary and Bill weren't used to that. That evening, Dagmar calls my mother and asked, "What did you feed the boys?" She said, "I don't think I fed them at all." Why? Dag said they were both throwing up and were sick to their stomachs. She was worried about possible food poisoning. We never let on. I don't think Gary and Bill ever came back there to eat again either. I think I was also a witness to Gary's first building. We had moved off the farm in 1947, and Clarence had built a new house on 66th and 11th Avenue after being bought out by the airport. One day, Gary started to build a fort in a wooded area about 65th and 11th Avenue. He used all of the lumber and fencing from our pig pens and built a fort 2 stories high. Then he later added a fence around the fort for protection. We called it Fort Apache. And we had several good games of cowboys and Indians. One day, we went there and it was gone. So we asked what happened. Clarence had told Gary to destroy it because he was worried about the neighbors possibly getting hurt and for liability purposes. It was greatly missed, but in building it, we witnessed the beginning of several structures built by Gary during his lifetime. I believe that's it. The minister has a prayer to say. Unless you want to read the rest of mine.
I'm Pastor Paul Marzon, and I friends with what you guys call Jimmy. I call Jim, Christian, and been friends for him for quite a few years. And I also grew up on a farm. I had an old Alice Chalmers. I had to crank start on those cold mornings, and so you go, and then every now and then my dad would hit the throttle and I'd almost lose an arm. So I remember those things. I remember the bucket trying to hook that up. I remember all those good stories. I love that you talked about walnuts. We had an old walnut tree, so I know that I learned out on the farm that walnuts are associated with intelligence, wisdom, knowledge, and inspiration. And my dad used to have one cut open, and in the center, if you look at a walnut, he had it up there, and he had this little saying on the side of the fridge, and we had always the walnut magnets. I don't know if you ever had that. They would stick to the fridge, right? And so that's why I remember those words that were on there. And he said that if you ate those, and I don't know if it's a true story or not, but he says you gain wisdom, knowledge, and inspiration. So maybe that's why he was such a wise man, as he had a lot of walnuts, right? And being a farmer, I grew up on the farm. All my cousins were farmers. I can remember the garbage to the hogs. I remember all those same stories. When my Uncle Bob died, he passed away just recently. And then I had my Uncle Leroy. He made it to 98 on the same farm. He was born in the barn, literally. And he lived there 95 years. And we just did his funeral last week. He made it to 98. And at his funeral, I shared this passage that I would just like to share today because it's a farmer passage. It's a reminder that good seed produces a good crop. It sounds like Gary was a man who produced a good crop. Looked at the family and friends that are here today. Jesus said, "Very truly I tell you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if the seed dies, it will bear much fruit. Remember this, those who love their life will lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. You see, whoever serves me will follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. Whoever serves me, the Father will honor. Whoever serves me, the Father will honor." I don't know what Gary's seminary career was like. If it's anything like mine, we call it the cemetery, not the seminary. I didn't do well in Latin either. That's why I'm a Protestant pastor. I got the Greek award, though, so I did okay. All right. With that in mind, let our hearts and minds be in an attitude of prayer. We pray today with joyful hearts, but also heavy hearts, as we mourn the loss of one that we have loved so much. And we ask, Lord, that you would be present with us in our time of grief, in our time of sorrow, and that you would be with all who mourn with us this day. Comfort our pain, encourage our hearts, and help us to believe in the promises and the hope of your grace and resurrection. We acknowledge all that you have given us here in this room, and all that you have given us is yours. And at first you gave Gary to us, and so now we give Gary back to you. Receive Gary into the arms of your mercy, and we thank you for sharing his life with us. And for all that Gary has taught us, for the example that Gary lived, and for the faith that Gary shared, we give you thanks. Touch our hearts today as we mourn the loss of one that we've loved so dearly, and give us the faith to believe in your promises. May you encourage us with the peace that you have promised, and the peace that Gary knew so well. Remind us in your presence in our time of grief, and be with us today as we pray the prayer that you taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen.
A child really tells their father how they really feel. A handshake or a pat on the back is all that they reveal. We like to right that wrong here in this little song. Thank you for shaping our life. Thank you for teaching us so you can. You are no ordinary man, no, no, no. You make us everything we are. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for showing us the way. And thank you for being there when we needed you. Thank you for every single day. Now we've been blessed with kids of our own, got our own bedtime stories to tell. If we can raise them half as well as you raised us, guess we've been doing pretty well. Thank you for your guiding hand. Thank you for making our dreams come true. You're an extraordinary man, and we hope you're as proud of us as we are proud of you. Thank you for giving us life. Thank you for showing us good from bad. We guess we're only really trying to say thank you for being our dad. Even though the years drift away, we never took the time just to say we love you, and we always have. And thank you for being our dad.
Hi, I'm the grandson of Gary. Thank you all for coming out here, braving the storm to come. a couple of stories there I haven't heard myself, and it kind of explains a lot as far as some of my shenanigans I've gotten into and where I get it from. So we really thank you for all you being here, cards, the gifts, the expressions of kindness and compassion. So we'd like to welcome you to join us in the adjacent room over here for food and drinks and remembering Gary some more. So thank you.